T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5. All three engines up and burning. 2, 1, 0, and liftoff.
Welcome to the Citizens of Tech podcast. This is show number 44, and today we're going to be talking about things you can do in the Opera browser, a soft-bodied robot, ghosts in the MP3, the LRAD sound cannon that you need for the house, going fast turns out to be really dangerous, myths and legends of MacBook battery replacement, and more. And Eric, let's start right off here. You said the Opera browser is still a thing, which I was like, oh, I remember the Opera browser. Like, yeah. And then I didn't ever use it, like, ever, and I'd forgotten about it.
Yeah, I used to use it back when there was no Chrome, basically. I used to use Opera.
So you favor Chrome at this point as well?
Largely, yes.
My thought, I use Chrome too, and that's because I use so many Google apps. I just assume, whether it's true or not, that Chrome is the best browser to run Google apps in.
Oh, yeah. I mean, if you use Inbox, Google Inbox, instead of Gmail, it's a far better experience on Chrome than, say, Firefox or Internet Explorer.
For me, it's whatever. Google Apps. I use Docs and Drive heavily.
Yep.
So, yeah. Anyway,
Anyhow,
but Opera.
Yeah, take me to the Opera. So Opera this headline came up the other day, and Opera they are not even in the running, essentially, when it comes to market share. In days of yore, it was Mozilla Firefox, Internet Explorer, and Opera. Those were the three major browsers back in the early 2000s, right? Market share for Opera has sort of dropped off since then, and it's right around an optimistic 5% of global market share.
Well, it's at least statistically significant.
It's not nothing.
Yeah.
But, I'm going to guess it's more like 2 or 3%, but anyhow. One interesting thing, when I was looking up these stats, it's the top browser in most of Africa, which was kind of surprising to me.
Yeah, I'm wondering if there's something culturally significant about that, or Opera gives you some feature that if you're in Africa, you take advantage of it.
The only thing that I could come up with is exactly that. There's a feature that they have called Opera Turbo, where they essentially compress things in transit to you and reduce the amount of bandwidth required to transmit.
So in theory, if you're in Africa and you're in a bandwidth have-not situation, Opera makes your browsing experience better.
Exactly.
Of that.
Yeah, I was actually reading an article about a wildlife preserve ranger that had a Windows 10 update download over their satellite internet connection, and it was thousands of dollars, things like that. So bandwidth is a serious issue in Africa. So that's my thinking behind it. Anyhow, that 5% share is interesting because Chrome, Internet Explorer / Edge, Safari, and Firefox, in that order, are all far more popular in the rest of the world outside of Africa.
Yeah, it's funny. I use Chrome and Safari and Firefox for different reasons.
Situations, right? Yeah. So Opera is introducing a very interesting feature to their browser in what I honestly see as sort of an attempt at grabbing more market share, but really it's using a method that I actually fully endorse because state snooping is rampant in many parts of the world, right? In oppressive regimes and even less oppressive regimes here in America, you have to be at least a little concerned that someone's watching what you're browsing, right?
I'm not a little concerned. I'm overwhelmingly concerned.
Okay. I was trying to, temper the...
No, it's yes, that is... It is part of life on the internet. You can count on people snooping your stuff, and you know that the U.S. government particularly now has been proven to have been able to backdoor encryption schemes, and that's been very well documented. Anyway.
Exactly. Anyhow, so enter the Opera VPN service. It encrypts all your data between your browser and Opera's termination point, wherever that may be. Or for all I know, it's in AWS or something. I don't know. I didn't dive that deeply into the infrastructure behind it. But the goal here is to allow region-restricted media consumption, for example. A Canadian user wants to watch U.S. Netflix, or a British Netflix user wants to watch U.S. Netflix.
Pretty common technique. You VPN into the country you want to pretend to be in, and then you can go from there.
Yep. I was just complaining an episode or two back about the BBC, right? Maybe this will let me watch the BBC. Who knows? Anyway, so the idea here is additionally to allow folks to access information that may be deemed unacceptable, quote unquote, by their governments or educational institutions and so forth, that may be able to benefit from this. So, Ethan, you and I, and probably many of our listeners are more than capable of setting these types of VPN connections up for ourselves. But I'm imagining that this could be beneficial to end user, Joe Sixpack, as it were, to be able to access things or at least have some, modicum of privacy.
It's all about ease of use, right?
Yeah, that's what my thought is.
Yeah,
and,
if somebody wants to have that privacy, then you need to make it easy to use. And if all of what a VPN is and what it can be and all the features are exposed to you, then it can be really hard to use.
Oh man!
So I've been on both ends of that, both setting up VPN servers, firewalls that need to have VPN functionality, as well as clients and configuring them, both in enterprise settings and then personal settings. And when you dig into it, there's a myriad of different styles of VPN, encryption schemes, authentication schemes that you can get involved with. So simplicity to just get that goal done. I want some privacy. I want encryption. If Opera's making this easy to use, that's a good thing. That's a win for, as you put it, Joe Sixpack.
Yep. And the big thing is,
could Joe use it after consuming a six-pack? That is the ease of use water test. That's it.
That's it. There's our new litmus test. Yeah. So the good thing about this I see is anything, if you activate this, anything you do in your Opera browser goes over this VPN tunnel. So ostensibly, anything you do in that browser should be secure.
It should be preserved from prying eyes. People that know what the traffic is that's coming from, they know that traffic is coming from your system, but it's wrapped in a tunnel now, and so all they're seeing is traffic heading off to Opera. It is encrypted, and you can't crack that if you're using a reasonably secure cipher.
Exactly.
It goes off to Opera. Opera then... What are they? Are they masquerading IPs?
I believe so, but I'm not sure. They were a little sketchy on the actual technical details here. Mm-hmm. It was more of a press release and trying to grab some headlines, I think.
But if you can fake country of origin, then they've got to be doing some kind of network address translation.
I assume so, yes.
Yeah.
So it sounds like a great feature, and apparently all this can be yours for the low price of free.
Yeah, because Opera.
Exactly. Yeah, I'll tell you though, it actually got me to download Opera again and play with it. And
on Windows or Mac?
On Windows, I was messing around.
And
with
how
it.
was the experience?
It's actually a really good browser.
So why is it good? Is it good because it's fast, or is there something about it that made you smile?
It's very responsive. It did very well with Google Apps, actually. Significantly better performance in Google Apps than I get with Firefox, for instance. Because Firefox is a pig with Google Apps until multiprocessor Firefox comes along, which is another story that we sort of talked about before, but is actually trickling out for people now. And by, I believe, the end of next year, everyone's going to be on multiprocess Firefox. But irrelevant to this discussion, I guess. It really felt snappy. Mm-hmm. It was kind of cool to use it again because a lot has changed, but a lot has stayed the same as well. So it was familiar, speed dial, where you put your most frequently used sites on there, and then you have hotkeys that will launch these sites automatically, things like that. So it's got a lot of really cool features in it. But it's hard to beat Chrome at this point. So I don't know. It was interesting to me. I like the idea and where they're trying to go. And if they're going to provide any additional security, even if it's just that base level of hopefully no one's able to intercept this, I'm all for it.
Well, it's tempting to try it. I mean, I'm using a very simple and actually insecure PPTP, point-to-point tunneling protocol. PPTP is not terribly secure.
It's not L2TP or whatever. Yeah,
you can crack that data if you want and get into the username and password. I don't think once the cipher is set up, it's crackable. I think it's the authentication phase that's the exchange. That's the vulnerable part. Yeah. But I was able to set up a VPN to my house using the little firewall I have here by Ubiquiti, and which is a Ubiquiti Edge firewall. and do hairpin routing off that firewall, meaning all my traffic can go through the PPTP tunnel, hit the Ubiquity firewall, get hairpin turned around to the internet wherever it needs to go, come back to that firewall, then back up the tunnel to me, so I can be off wherever and basically have all of my network traffic encrypted. So if I'm sitting in, I don't know, a Starbucks or something like an open access point,
right,
and I'm really concerned that someone's going to grab my traffic out of the air, and there's something I'm working on that I don't want them to do, and I don't have an HTTPS connection, something like that, fine, I could go PPTP, send everything home. It adds a lot of latency because everything I could do would have to go over the internet to my house and back.
And then back, yeah.
But, yeah, there's advantages to that for privacy reasons. And
Yep.
Opera's doing basically the same kind of thing with the VPN, it sounds like.
Sounds very much the same.
Yeah.
So, what's this about soft-bodied octobots?
So, robotics. We tend to think of parts making up the robot that are physically hard. They're made of metal, they're made of plastic, they're made of something that is rigid, and that sort of a form factor is traditional, easy to construct, and you've got predictable places in which you can mount the electronics and put servo motors and and so on. That's a very specific physics problem we know how to deal with, right?
Sure.
Okay, but what if you want that robot to climb into a very tight space and squeeze it through? You can't, right?
Right.
It's the size it is. It is made up of rigid structures, metal and plastic and whatever else. You can't squeeze it through anything. It is what it is. It fits in the hole or it does not.
I don't know. I put it in the compactor, and now it doesn't work anymore.
Exactly. So what if we had a soft-bodied robot, a robot that had locomotive ability, that you could squeeze through tight spaces or into awkward situations, and
literally
and so on.
like an octopus, how it can
Literally like an
crawl
octopus.
inside of a jar.
And that's what's finally been achieved here. This Octobot is a soft-bodied robot that is able to move itself through space. And they've overcome some challenges here, because along the way, the challenges, as they've kind of gotten to this particular form, they made some like hybrid soft body and hard body parts, because you need places to mount the electronics, you need places to put the fuel, and so on. So there was kind of some compromise designs, and they finally got to this design that's all soft body. And the way it works is you've got flexible electronics on the inside of this thing. It does look like an octopus, so think of that. It's kind of got a big bulbous head with the electronics and the main microprocessor board mounted inside of it, and then 8 legs. And it is fueled by a hydrogen peroxide that works with a platinum catalyst to make compressed oxygen. So it's not combustion. It's not, there's no explosion of any kind going on.
But it's still an oxidation.
It is a chemical reaction, right, that results in oxygen. The oxygen is trapped and it is compressed, and then the microprocessor actually can route that compressed oxygen through tubes, as they describe them. They use the term microfluidic channels within the soft body to chambers in the legs, the octopus arms, where the oxygen can then expand. And so now you've got this like bulb inside the arm that expands and causes it to flex and move in a controlled way.
So there's probably dozens or hundreds of these per arm?
They showed a video, and they did not show that many. They showed just a few, like 2 or maybe 3 largish compartments, and the movement you got out of it was pretty coarse.
Yeah,
it seemed like more
jerky.
proof of concept than anything.
Yeah,
it's not like if you're imagining, they've made a robot that swims smoothly like an octopus through the ocean. No, nothing like that. It's more like a child's toy that was sitting on the table, kind of going beep bloop bloop bloop, waving its arms around. But still, proof of concept. They've got a microprocessor controlling microfluidic channels, routing compressed oxygen through the thing to expand chambers that can manipulate the limb and therefore get a locomotive effect. So neat,
That's really neat.
It is. It's kind of a step one, and over time this is intended to be. They're going to develop this further and then be able to do things with it, like make a robot that could squeeze into tight spaces, for example.
And eventually they can unleash the Kraken.
Yeah, of course. I mean, are we not? Is that not? Where else would we be going with this?
It's the logical conclusion.
That's where we go with this. So, Eric, you and I are into music and sound and so on, and you found something, the Ghost in the MP3. It was a project tied back to the old Tom's Diner song by Suzanne Vega, that hit from the 80s, where that one, yes. Okay. Now that earworm's in, everyone listening to you hates you now. Okay, good.
Mission accomplished.
But this, what happened here? He made a song based on the lossiness of the MP3 algorithm. And
yeah. So this was a really cool article. This sound engineer took the lost data from compressing the song into MP3 format, because a little bit of backstory here. Tom's Diner was a fundamental piece of music in the development of the MP3 codec. It was one of the test samples that they would compress it and say, okay, is that listenable? Does that resemble, the CD quality audio? And they
were sorry they chose that about a week into the project.
7,000 times I've had to listen to this song. Anyway, he took the data that's lost and salvaged it and made a piece called Modernist, which is sort of uppercase, lowercase, weird.
And the big thing here is MP3s are a lossy audio format. The more you compress them, the lower the bit rate, the more audio that you've lost. It is a compromise solution, even when you do high-quality streaming, like Spotify's high-quality streaming, I believe, is 320 kilobits per second, which is roughly a 4-to-1 compression.
Yep.
Full CD streaming, if I remember right, is 144, something like that. Does that sound right?
Yep.
Full bandwidth, that's the data rate that is embedded in the disk in Redbook format. MP3s, again, 320K, your human ear would really struggle for the most part to tell the difference.
320 is good lossiness. Quality, but yes, there is loss.
And 128K used to be called quote-unquote CD quality, which it absolutely is not. But it used to be the standard of, if you want to have a really good MP3, sounding MP3, 128K is the place to go.
Right, because to the untrained ear, it was close enough.
Yes.
Right, and you could get a song down to 3 or 4 megs instead of, 20. Or whatever.
And interestingly, at 128K, well, at any of these compression rates, the things that suffer the most are treble.
Yep.
So a cymbal crash would really sound tinny and harsh because you lose all of the nuance of that sound. And a bass sound would do much better with those compression algorithms.
Yeah, and that's actually exactly where this Ghost in the MP3 title comes from. Because if you listen to this piece, if you go to the URL, we'll link in the show notes, at theghostinthemp3.com, if you listen to this piece, you really hear this sort of ethereal, hot, top end bits of the song that were lost. And at first, it's funny because you don't recognize it, but then if you're sort of singing it along in your head as you listen to it, and you go, oh, that's where she takes the breath before she starts in on the chorus or whatever. It was a really cool illustration of what data is cut off at the top level of the compression and the amount of information that you lose. And then he actually did the same thing with the video for it as well, taking the salvaged data from the MP4 compression of the video. And this was in collaboration with a Japanese researcher, Takahiro Suzuki. And essentially, both the audio and video versions of this are just the ghosts of the compression codecs used to slim down the file size.
They made a video of the lost video bits from the MP4 compression and paired it with the lost MP3 bits.
It's trippy to watch. Yeah, it was really kind of a cool, it was such an abstract thing that I never would have thought of. And here it is in front of me. I'm just sitting there going, this is so cool. How did you think of this? But I'm glad you did. It was super interesting to me because we forget about the stuff that gets lost in compression.
Yeah, it's the real audio files that track these
exactly.
things. I had a buddy of mine, this is going back, 15 years ago. He was a real audiophile, loved, I had a very expensive stereo at home, would listen to CDs and so on. I can't listen to MP3s. They make my ears bleed. And we'd make fun of him, but, I kind of got it. What he was really talking about, because if you listen at that level, if you have that critical of an ear and that well trained of an ear, the lossiness of an MP3 becomes apparent to you, and the higher the compression, the worse it sounds. And especially if you're listening on crappy sound reproduction equipment like built-in laptop speakers, or the earbuds that came with your iPhone, which I see people listening to them all the time, and I can't handle those.
No. The quality just isn't good enough.
So bad.
So
bad.
Interesting, sort of tangential thing here. I was reading an article, speaking of sound quality and audio files, I was reading an article by a guy who had 15 minutes to listen to a set of $55,000 headphones. I believe they're made by Sennheiser, but I'm not sure. And he is an audiophile, so he sort of broke down. Okay, I listened to this track, and I listened to these tracks, and he was like, I'm heading into this 15-minute appointment where you have to ascend the stairs, and you are led into this room with Tidal, I think, was because they're 320K lossless, blah 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 blah, the audio quality streaming service, right? And so he was talking about all the songs he listened to, and he said, it made me wish I had $55,000 to buy these headphones because I heard things in the music that I had never heard before.
Well, this is funny. In my car, you and I have driven around. I spent some money for a substantially upgraded stereo, and we both remarked on how much clearer it sounds compared to what the stock head unit and speakers were with an aftermarket head unit and speakers. Just the clarity, and again, hearing things you'd never heard before is really remarkable.
Yeah, and actually, I was commenting to you earlier when I was driving in my car today. My Volt came with XM radio trial that I'll probably never pay for, but it's nice while it's free. I'm cheap, so anyway, I heard XM is CD quality audio, and Glycerine by Bush came on. And I probably hadn't heard it except in MP3 form for years and years and years and years, okay? And so hearing it in CD quality, I realized something. I never recognized that the bass line isn't just played by a bass guitar, but it's actually played rather accompanied by either a cello or an actual bass, a stand-up bass.
A full-on bowed string as opposed to a plucked bass guitar,
right?
Something that we played with the hands and fingers.
Yeah, and it adds something to it. It lends an amazing depth and quality to the bass line that I sort of always had appreciated, but I never really was sure why. And hearing it just at a higher quality than I was used to hearing it at made that difference. And that was just on my car stereo with a higher fidelity encoding rate. So. Yeah, this whole thing just sort of made, the compression aspect of music production and consumption just jump out at me. It was really cool. And definitely, if that interests you at all, head over to theghostinthemp3.com. It was a really interesting and sort of eclectic trip down audio and visual compression.
So I got something else related to sound that came at me on Twitter. I forget exactly I tweeted something, I don't remember what, and someone tweeted back at me, "You need one of these." And what they tweeted at me was a Gizmodo article about the LRAD sound cannon. Oh, baby. So this article goes back to 2014. It wasn't like a recent thing, but it just covers what the LRAD sound cannon is. And long story short, it is an acoustic weapon. Is how I would describe it. Or not, because the LRAD people claim it is, quote, a directed sound communication device. Screaming toddlers, I would argue, could be classified as a weapon. They are also directed sound communication devices. Anyway, what this thing is, it is, as you would imagine, as a sound cannon, it is a device that sends sound across distance in a very loud way. So it's got a 30-degree wide beam. It can transmit voice commands as loud as 162 decibels as far as 5.5 miles away. Wow. This is a startling amount of power. And if you're trying to 162 decibels, what does that mean? How loud is that? All right, so first of all, remember that the decibel scale is logarithmic. It's not linear. So if you were to do the math on this, you can Google plenty of explanations for this. A 3 decibel increase is about double the volume. A 10 decibel increase is about 10 times the volume. And a 60 decibel increase is about 1,000,000 times the volume of your starting point.
Wow.
So 162 decibels, remember, is as loud as this thing could possibly go. Humans start to feel pain around 120 decibels. I remember reading a Guinness World Book of Records when I was a kid, and there were some records in there for the loudest things known. One of them involved a jet engine takeoff, and one of them was The Who, the rock band The Who, playing a live concert, and it was something like 130 decibels. I'm going from memory here. I could be wrong. But you start to feel pain around 120 as a human. You're going to lose hearing permanently at 130 decibels. And so let's say the LRAD was just 140 decibels. Then, to quote the article, anyone within its path would not only suffer hearing loss, they could potentially lose their balance and be unable to move out of the path of the audio.
Wow.
A sound so loud you lose your balance. That's kind of awesome.
Wow.
And so tell me it's not a weapon, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they say, well, it's a directed sound communication device. Just don't get in its way. Okay.
Or it will make you go deaf and you won't be able to move.
So let me read another quote here that gives you some more impressive stats of this thing. There's a few different grades of it. There's a 2000X, which is like the military grade. A slightly lesser capable is the 500X. And here's a quote. The LRAD Corporation says that anyone within a 100 meters of the device's sound path will experience extreme pain. The version generally utilized by police departments, the LRAD 500X, is designed to communicate at up to 2,000 meters during ideal conditions. In a typical outdoor environment, the device can be heard for 650 meters. The 500X is also capable of short bursts of directed sound that cause severe headaches in anyone within a 300-meter range. Anyone within 15 meters of the device's audio path can experience permanent hearing loss. I really want one of these.
How can they possibly say this is not a weapon?
Actually, what I tweeted back was, I could not be trusted with such a thing.
No good would come of this. You know, it reminds me of the speech jammer. Did you ever see that thing?
No.
It's a device that if you start speaking, it actually has a laser measurement device on board that measures how far the speech jammer device is from you and then determines how long of a delay to put in to project your own voice back at you. And it makes it impossible to speak properly. So it obviously doesn't cause hearing damage or anything, but you can get there's also an app for like Android and iPhone where you put headphones on and then you try to talk and it uses the microphone on your phone to loop your voice back to you like a half a second or a quarter of a second delay, and it messes with your mind. You think, oh, I could talk even if, no way.
No. You ever had it on an IP phone call?
Yes.
Where the echo's coming
echo,
back, and it's just you can't do it. Your brain just shuts down.
Someone mute the phone. Yeah.
Terrible.
It reminds me a little bit of that because it's a sound device. That was a really cool device that I remember reading about, 4 years ago or something like that. But
there's a precedent for the sound cannon being used as a weapon. I mean, I remember going back to the 80s when Manuel Noriega was one of the regional bad guys on this side of the planet. They had stacked up speakers and were cranking rock and roll super loud at him as kind of as a siege tactic. Yeah. That I guess had some sort of an effect. I don't know how much. I forgot what they were playing. I just remember that was a thing. Like, really loud music as a weapon. I never really thought about that, but that's how they were trying to get him out of his fortress he was holed up in.
For those about to rock,
yes,
we salute you.
So, Eric, as we were writing the show, you dug deep into a little more about Breakthrough Starshot. One of the technical challenges being, all right, if we accelerate and go super fast, like these little guys that we've talked about in a previous show, these little ships are supposed to go as fast as 20% of the speed of light. What happens if you hit something? And I don't mean hit like, something big, but, in the vast emptiness of space, you assume we've projected a straight line with no large planetary bodies in the way.
Right.
What if you hit something really small? When you're going that fast, is that a big deal or not?
Yeah, it turns out that going 20% the speed of light is really dangerous.
Okay.
So, yeah, Breakthrough Starshot is that plan to send thousands of little microships to Alpha Centauri is the first target, right? We talked about this several shows back, but and they're going to have onboard sensors relay information back.
And we get data back within our lifetime is the big idea.
That's the whole goal.
Yeah.
So to quote a top-notch documentary on the subject, quote, space is big, really big, You just won't believe how vastly, hugely, mind-bogglingly big it is. I mean, you may think it's a long way down the road to the chemist, but that's just peanuts to space. So, yeah, Alpha Centauri is 4.37 light years away, which, according to my calculations, is about 40 trillion kilometers, which is a long way. The speed of light comes in at just about 300,000 kilometers per second. So 20% the speed of light is 60-ish thousand kilometers per second. And that's fast. We all know that, right? You think 60,000 kilometers a second. Yeah, that's fast. But the human mind has a hard time wrapping around numbers like that.
It's fast, but the distance is so large, you can't.
Yeah.
It's hard to take that in when the fastest most of us has gone is something shy of 100 miles an hour.
So, yeah, to put that in context, how fast is 60,000 kilometers per second? The moon is 384,000 kilometers away, give or take a few hundred kilometers. At 20% the speed of light, you could get to the moon in 6.4 seconds instead of the 72 or so hours that Apollo spacecraft took to get there.
I mean, if you assume instantaneous acceleration, all that stuff.
You'd have to be going by the Earth. At
okay, kids, strap in. This is going to be a little fast.
We're going to slingshot around
this
Mercury.
You might feel a little bit of a pinch here. You actually may turn into Jello.
You might experience some discomfort.
6.4
Cue the screaming.
So we're here. Oh, let's not do that again.
Ever. So at that speed, 4.37 light years away to Alpha Centauri, it's about 20 to 30 years at the projected speeds, which are 15 to 20% the speed of light for Breakthrough Starshot. So regular atoms, like helium and stuff like that, aren't really a problem, even at that
very
speed.
low nuclei.
Exactly.
Very small particles.
I mean, they're going to be designed to deal with this sort of speed and the friction related.
Which, are we still talking teeny tiny chance that would happen? I mean, there's not a measurable density of hydrogen or helium hanging around in the vacuum of space, is there?
Yeah, I mean, it's minute, but it will happen statistically. Helium, hydrogen, and all that, the light elements will collide with these, and they've been designed to deal with that, basically. Where the problem comes in is with heavier elements. Not hydrogen, helium. We're talking about silicon dioxide. And,
I thought you were going to say like a comet.
And iron.
still minute particles, but a heavier atomic mass, and maybe not just one atom, but like something like a measurable piece of dust.
Yeah. So it turns out that 15 micrometers is large enough to destroy one of these tiny ships. So at that speed, something 15 micrometers across will be big enough to destroy one of these, which is incredibly small.
We're still down at the atomic scale.
Right.
Yeah.
We're talking just big atoms.
Right.
Or largish simple molecules. Heat is also one of the serious issues. It's actually the most serious issue at this speed because of the friction. Even in space, there's enough matter that's going to be pushing against these that they're going to heat up. And
really?
Yeah. Unless you can dissipate heat or build it to withstand enough heat, even in the depths of space, these impacts will generate enough friction resistance.
I never would have guessed that. I would have assumed they'd had to heat these things, because that's one of the things they talk about is the space probes, for example, which are not moving anything close to the speeds we're talking about. They have to be heated in order for their electronics to work, which is one of the power management challenges of deep space probes.
Yep. Yeah, they use a nuclear material that heats and heat is a serious issue for these going at this speed. And
Star Trek lying to me.
I know, right? Inertial dampeners. It's statistically improbable that particulate matter would cause significant loss of swarm density because, again, these are going to be going out in thousands of these little things. So you're going to lose some of them, whatever, no big deal. That's the intended purpose. You throw a lot of them out there, and the ones that survive will send information back. It's actually a 10 to the 50th to 1 against particles large enough to do damage actually colliding with any given craft. So that's 10 with 50 zeros after it to 1, that a 15 micrometer or larger particle will hit one of these. Because there are very few of them in space, because it's space.
Those odds are... it's so unlikely that's going to happen.
Astronomical.
I know. Oh, you had to say that. But seriously, they're still worried about this problem?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just due diligence. Really, it could happen, so they're trying to engineer around it as much as possible. Just because something's highly improbable doesn't mean it won't happen.
And what if this is an issue of we don't know what we don't know, and maybe it's a little more probable than we think it is?
There could be a dust cloud that we can't see in between. Who knows? But
Shields up.
Probability isn't as clear cut as people think. It's that if 20 people are in the same room, the chances that they share a birthday. Have you heard this thing?
That one of them types a dictionary, works of Shakespeare?
Monkeys and no.
Something.
Yeah, there's something. I think it's 20 people in a room, random.
The chance
that
one
they
of
will
them
share a
having
birthday is it's huge.
Yes.
And you wouldn't think so probability-wise, but because of the number of days in a year and all this, it's highly probable.
Yes.
Anyhow. So they're proposing a few solutions to this. Heat shielding to take care of the heat, made of graphite to keep the craft and the instruments on board cool enough to survive and to do the useful scientific measurements that they're intended to do.
I said shields up a second ago, and I thought I was kidding.
No,
Apparently
yeah,
not.
graphite shield, seriously.
Okay.
And then a physical shield to block those particulate matter that might destroy them, and giving it more of a bullet-like shape, basically reducing the amount of front-facing surface
the profile of it as it's actually going through space.
Exactly.
So a less of a cross-section facing the forward motion.
Make it longer and thinner than,
So I'm going to get my spaceship that looks like the cool thing I saw in Bugs Bunny when I was a kid. That iconic rocket shape with the fins at the bottom.
And it's going to be about a centimeter long.
Yeah, exactly.
And then the other big thing is folding the solar sail, because these are going to use solar sails to accelerate.
Right.
So goes the theory anyhow. And fold it up to get it out of the way, because if it's not there to get hit, then that's much less surface area to be worried about. So the other big thing that comes into play here at these sorts of speeds is keeping the crafts on course, because even small atomic impacts will throw the vector of the craft off a tiny little bit, but we're talking trillions of kilometers here. So a billionth of a degree over 1 trillion kilometers still throws you off by huge amounts. So
you've got to be able to correct the attitude of your flight path to keep yourself on track. You can't just aim at launch and go, okay, it's all good. You got to be able to adjust for whatever deviations happen.
Yeah, and I don't know that they're actually capable of doing that at this point, which is, I think, part of yet another reason why they're Johnny Appleseeding. Throw 1,000 of them or 2,000 of them out there, and some of them will make it and some of them won't. Whatever. Maybe 20 will make it, and they'll relay information.
Well, they'd have to have highly controlled propulsion, something
and
that could
you
contradict.
Can't pack that into something that's small.
And how could you control it anyway? You're talking an atomic deviation. You need to be able to adjust with an atomic deviation.
Right. And then, at year 12... 200 days and 3 hours, an atom of helium hit it and threw it off course. It's not.
They can use GPS. They can't use GPS.
Not so much.
Work out. No.
Galactic positioning system.
Exactly.
So yeah,
the heat. The heat problem is the one that's throwing me. I'm still.
It does kind of blow my mind.
Really unexpected to me that you're going to have a heat problem in space because of the speed. Because I've been thinking there's no matter. There's nothing. It's not like you're going down through the atmosphere of a planet where there is all of this, all of a sudden, molecular substance hitting you that wasn't there before, and now you've got a heat problem because of all the speed you're carrying. In space, in theory, there's nothing there. But this is interesting. This is really educational. There is something there.
There's just so little of it that it doesn't matter until you're approaching ludicrous speeds.
That it matters.
and thousands of times faster velocities than we're used to, here on Earth or even with our existing spacecraft.
So it's funny, I made the crack about Star Trek, but I think the theory behind Star Trek warp travel is you've got a bubble around you, and
Right.
You're actually warping the fabric of space-time.
You're slipping between everything.
You're not actually traversing physical space in that context. If I remember the theory, I mean, obviously it's fiction, but there is some attempt at trying to get real science behind how that all works.
The physics of Star Trek.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it would be a very different problem in the case of warp travel in the theoretical world of Star Trek, but still,
we live in the future and it's cool.
Yeah.
So you have a MacBook that needs a new battery.
I have a tired battery. Yes, in this MacBook, it's about 4 years old. It's a MacBook Retina 13-inch machine I bought in 2012. And when it was new, I don't remember exactly what the lifespan was, but it was 6+ hours,
6 to 8.
something
I'm gonna
like
guess.
that.
Yeah.
And I have occasion to get on planes and go from the East Coast to the West Coast and back fairly often. I do that trip a few times a year, head over to San Francisco or Silicon Valley and talk to tech companies. Okay. Well, it's something wonderful when you can sit on a plane and get some work done. And now I've noticed after 4 years, my poor old MacBook, I cannot get cross-country. If this is a first-world problem, if I've ever heard one, right?
Without plugging it in.
My MacBook won't get me all the way across-country on the plane anymore,
As I
Eric.
fly at 50,000 feet and
Like a god in a leather chair through the sky
sipping cool beverages and
with my internet connection.
pontificating about tech industry. Yeah.
Anyway, this kind of, because I was actually
End
running...
of segment. No,
and
that's it. No.
I've been running my laptop out of battery as I go on these cross-country trips. And it's whatever. It's fine.
Yeah.
Suck it up and deal with it. It's really not that bad. But, it's like,
When you're trying to get work done, it's a pain.
I was thinking, I'll just get a new laptop. It's 4 years of time. Then I started looking, it's like, wow, those are,
Maybe
apples
I
are
won't.
expensive.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll keep this one because it's lovely and shiny, and the Retina's, it's right in front of me right now. And Apple, it turns out, will replace the battery in my laptop for $199.
That's pretty reasonable.
They got a price list, and this is one of the more expensive replacements at $199. It's like, that's awesome.
It's a heck of a lot cheaper than a new laptop.
Absolutely. All the ones I spec'd were in the $1,500 to $2,000 range, and I don't really need anything different from the one I've got. It's kind of fine. And so I went online to Apple support. Can I mail it in? Can I do that kind of stuff? And because we don't have an Apple store near us, living out in the sticks of New Hampshire where we live.
Yeah. Plan your hour-and-a-half excursion to the nearest Apple store.
And so I'm talking to whatever his or her name was, and I get all the way through the process. We find out we can do this thing, and you need to tell me your username and password. She says your admin level username and password so we can replace the battery. I'm like, nope, not giving that to you. Not going to happen.
I had the same thing happen.
Oh,
Not for battery, for a screen replacement.
it's just. I don't want to give up my admin username and password to Apple or to anybody else.
No.
Why would I give someone with physical access to my machine the keys to the kingdom? I'm not going to do that. That doesn't make any sense. I've got business stuff on here. I've got personal things on here. It's nothing that would be embarrassing, but it's nothing that is anybody else's business.
The principle of the thing.
And there's that. The principle of the thing. To me, Apple is a tech company. It is morally outrageous to me that they would expect this so that they can do a hardware replacement.
It's downright offensive.
I mean, I could service the thing myself, I guess. I dug in and looked at what it would take to replace the battery. If you go to ifixit.com, there's a link in the show notes. There are 38 steps just to get the new battery out, or to get the old battery out, and then to get the new battery in. You got to put all the system back together.
It's an extensive.
You got to reverse those 38 steps because these lovely thin Apple laptops that we all like had to go ooh and ah. When you pull the cover off, everything is super precisely engineered. All the cables, all the flexible boards have very fine connection points. There's very teeny tiny little screws. The cable routing for the speakers is a thing. Everything is sandwiched in layers. There are air routing concerns, etc. And so to actually do it, could I do it? Yes, I could do it. I've done similar fine work before. I'm a little scared I would damage the aluminum case because there's a lot of glue that holds the old battery in, and everything I read about it says it just sucks trying to get that the old battery out because of the heavy glue that was involved to get it in.
Yep.
I don't really want to do that.
I'm just overworking on small things like
I'd be sitting there. I work on my watches occasionally, just dropping in new batteries and stuff like that. And I actually bought a loop. You put the visor down with the magnifying glass just so I can see what I'm doing. I'd be working with that the whole time to get through this laptop battery swap. And I'm not entirely sure I'd get a good battery. And I'm really worried about that because you get a crap battery that expands over time, may be functional, but it starts to swell up. Most of us have had that problem with replacement batteries. In a tight tolerance chassis, could you imagine a battery leaking, like you just said, or swelling up?
Yep.
And I don't want to play that game
hardware.
either. So it's definitely worth it to me to have Apple do it, but I'm not giving up my admin username or any admin username and password to do it. She's like, "Oh, you could do auto logon." It's like that didn't fix the problem.
Nope.
So,
someone's still going to have access to my stuff.
So I'm hoping. I mean, we do have an Apple store within about 35, 40 minutes of us in Manchester
now.
Yeah, there is. So it's not terrible. So I'm thinking I'll call down there. I'll make an appointment on the assumption that if I can physically be there, if they want to check something after they get the new battery installed, then I could do it for them while I'm monitoring what's going on. Because I'm sure all they really want to do is just check something. There's something they're looking at to validate.
It seems
whatever.
to me, you replace the battery, right? You then open said laptop, hit the power button. If it boots, the battery's okay.
I'm wondering if they want to validate, because it's an intelligent battery that's got
so like it's predicting the amount of charge, the number
something
of hours
like that, duty cycles and so on. Like
yeah.
my battery now in this laptop reads that it needs service. It tells me how many duty cycles it's been through and so on. So anyway, during this whole process and this sad story and this first world problem, Google shows up a kind of interesting article that claims to breathe new life into an old battery, just screwing around with a little bit of software. Not that you have to install any software. There's just some steps you can take on your Mac that supposedly is going to, bring back the life that you lost. Give you back, an hour and a half or two of battery life. And I was like, huh.
I call shenanigans.
You rightly call shenanigans. So let me tell you what happens here. It's pretty straightforward, and I have a link to that article too. That was on imore.com. First, you need to clear your PRAM and NVRAM settings. You power cycle, you hold down Command Option P and R, and reboot the system, and you let go. It's going to come up, and it makes the Mac noise.
Yep.
It's going to do that again, and then you let go and let it boot back up. And so now you've cleared PRAM and NVRAM settings. Okay. Then second, you are supposed to erase in your user directory, there's a library preference com.apple.desktop.plist file, your preference lists.
Yep.
Or there's tons and tons of them you'll find in that folder. Erase the com.apple.desktop.plist file. And then you're going to kill all dock, which effectively reloads your dock with new preferences. So whatever your old preferences were, now your dock's been reloaded without those preferences because of that file you deleted. Okay, cool. I did all of that stuff. Reset my PRAM, NVRAM, worked properly, erased that file, kill all dock, etc. And what did I see? So I did see that the battery life estimate climbed. So I've got a little tool I run that sits up in my bar called iStat menu. And the iStat menu I have tells me exactly what my estimated battery life is. So instead of it being at high 3-hour range, it climbed up, and it kept climbing. It went up to 4, and then it got into the 5s, and I'm like, okay,
maybe this actually works.
Maybe it did something, and it got nearly to 6 hours, and I was like, all right, that's cool. And so then I started a timer. And it's like, how long is this actually going to last? You know how long it actually lasts? You already called shenanigans.
3 hours.
About 3.5 hours. Yeah, right. Nothing's different at all.
I'm betting that it was doing a new average energy consumption curve.
That is my thought.
And then as you actually started to use it, it adjusted that down and down and down and down and down.
And so I'm thinking exactly that. All that really got blown away by clearing out the PRAM, NVRAM, and those preference settings. The preference settings may have had something to do with CPU utilization in the background. The PRAM and NVRAM may have had some moving average, knowing over
Historical.
time, all that historical data that was there that it was using to fairly accurately predict how long your battery was going to last is now gone.
Yep.
And it would oscillate up and down depending on whether or not I was using the system. Not whether or not the screen was on or off, but if it was there and I wasn't doing anything, no input, it was just on, and I had the brightness set about halfway and the backlight on 1 bar, it would climb up. And then as soon as I started using it again, browsing or whatever, it would drop right back down.
That's exactly the same thing that my car actually does when you first get into it in the morning to take off. I hop in, I start driving, and because it's only measuring over the first mile, 2 miles, 3 miles, it's like, oh wow, you're doing terrible. And then as you add miles on, it's like, oh okay, you're evening out and things are looking better. So it's using what data it collects in real time and makes an estimate based on what's happening right now. And if things continue this way, it's going to do that. That sounds like what your computer's doing, essentially,
and
too.
Interestingly, I've been through about 3 or 4 discharge cycles on the laptop since I did that clearing of the PRAM and the NVRAM, and it's kind of back to normal.
Yeah.
It's not giving me any ridiculously high estimates for battery life anymore. So I think it's basically I made it dumb. And now it's getting smart again because it's got some data to work with, so the algorithm can do what it's designed to do. So, sorry, kids, software can't beat physics. It is what it is. The battery's old, it's tired, and that's life.
Sounds like a trip to the Apple Store.
So, Eric, have you learned anything today?
I did learn that we are mostly empty space, as is everything else. Atoms have electrons spinning around an incredibly compact nucleus. If you take out the space in between the nucleus and the electrons, you could actually fit the entire human race, 7 billion people, into the space taken up by the average apple. Or maybe a sugar cube. Although some brainiacs think there's no such thing as space exactly because it's all filled with electron clouds. So maybe we mean we just take out all the electrons.
But still, I mean, if you take all the atomic nuclei and cram them together for the entirety of the human race, we all fit in the space of an apple or a sugar cube or something.
Maybe as small as a sugar cube.
That's kind of
but
awesome.
At least as small as an apple. It's in an episode where we've talked about astronomical numbers to go, the opposite direction and talk about how tiny something is. We're talking about extremes on this episode. It was mind blowing to me to read that statistic.
Well, everyone, thanks for listening to Citizens of Tech this week. We'll see you on Reddit. We're out there at the Citizens of Tech subreddit where we're putting in articles and posting about the podcast, and we'd love it to exchange information with you there. We're also on Twitter at citizensoftech.com. There's over 500 of you that are following us. That is extraordinary. And Eric has been very diligent about putting out nerdy facts and other things onto the Twitter account to give you more reason to follow it other than, hey, we published another podcast.
Marketing.
And until next week, eat enough chocolate cake to make sure that your space could not possibly fit into that apple.